Who wants to sing a song with me? It goes like this. If I could turn back time. And you got to get a bubble in your throat, because if you know the song, you know the singer, there's a little bubble. You know, sing along. If I could turn back time, if I could take back words. Right? What do we want to do? We want to go what? Back, and we want to do what? We want to take back what we said. This is a great song if it was possible. In fact, if you Googled songs about time, there are thousands of them. Because time's an interesting thing. Time is what I would call the great equalizer, that it's equal for everybody. But not everything is equal, right? Like your house and my house are not equal. And your car and my car are not equal. And your health and my health aren't equal. And for some of you, your bank accounts and my bank accounts are not equal. But there's something that is staple, standard, equal for all of us, and it's time. And we know that, right? You're smart. You have, like I have, 60 seconds in a minute. And you have, like I have, 60 minutes in an hour. And you have, like I have, 24 hours in a day. And you have, like I have, 365 days in a year. This is all the same. And you're like, Dan, you're slipping here. This is no good. I already know this stuff. We can't take back time. I actually wish I could take back time sometimes. I wish I could take back time, turn around and go back and change some things. In fact, this guy wrote a song called Forever Young. We probably know this song. If you're over the age of 40, 30, 20s are like, who the heck is Rod Stewart? Listen, he's an icon. But he wrote a song about Forever Young, and he wrote the song because of all the time that he had lost and all the time that he had wasted without his kids. The song is about wishing his kids would stay forever young, or that he could go back. But as you know and I know, time's the great equalizer. Time is created and intended to keep moving forward. But time also does something for every single one of us. Time produces memories. That the longer the time goes on, the more we can remember things that we choose to remember, and we can remember them through a different lens. Let me give you a little bit of an example of this. And I made this statement boldly and probably not proudly, but I made it before. I did not enjoy the baby phase of my 4 kids. I wanted to just get through that as quickly as I could. Sleepless nights, all they wanted was mom, all they do was cry, all they do was poop, and it goes up the back, and then you're doing laundry. And I'm like, I can't wait for this phase to be over. And yet on the flip side of it, you're like, man, those were some good times. See, time produces memories. In fact, time produces memories that might not have actually been the reality at the time. You probably share some stories with your kids or your grandkids that they have no idea that it happened, but you remember it, and so you share it. Thursday nights, typically Thursday nights, I'm on the phone for about an hour and a half with my mom. It's my time to call my mom. We're coming up on 4-year anniversary of my dad's passing, and so she's alone, right? And so I call her every Thursday night. That's kind of my goal or my hope. And she'll share stories about my dad, or she'll share stories about my brother and I, because time produces in all of us, it produces memories. Some of them are good, right? And yet time also produces memories that we don't want to go back to. Let me give you a couple examples. I hope and I pray that we never go back to this. Paper straws. Remember when we wanted to save the turtles? We don't care about them anymore. It's gone. Unless you're in California. I'll pray for you. These are gone, and I hope we never go back to them. I hope we never go back to the black and white television with the antenna that you as a kid, your dad would sit on the couch, okay, go change the channel. And you would change the channel, because it could adjust the ears, and you would adjust them, and then you'd have to reach over, and then you'd scratch your nose and hold it right there. And then for 3 hours of Monday Night Football, you're standing in this position because it's a perfect picture for your dad. Anybody else? No, that's just me? Okay. I hope we never go back to that. I hope we never go back to this. True story, I hawked this off the Googles. If you can see what's here, I did not Photoshop this. I found this online when I was searching Yellow Pages images, and it's centerline. So thank you, Yellow Pages, for branding our church. It's fantastic. I hope we never go back to paper straws. I hope we never go back to televisions with rabbit ears. I hope we never go back to this. But probably most importantly, and every generation can say amen, is I hope we never go back to this. This is real life, people. And I'm going to let it play out. Right? The little hands go up. Ooh, we're connected. That's how long, if you're under the age of 20, 30, this is how long it took you to just get onto the interwebs. This does not include downloading a picture or trying to stream. You didn't do that. I hope we never, ever have to go back to that. And the truth is, in your life, just like in my life, we can laugh and we can have some fun, but there are some things in our lives that we should never go back to, but we do. There are some things in your life, just like in my life, that we should actually leave in the past, but we can't, or we won't. Here's the reality. This is not a profound statement at all, but it's a true statement. I want to remind you, friends, yesterday's over. It's gone. Tomorrow, according to Scripture, is unknown. We're not promised tomorrow. Which means that today, this moment right now, is actually our only opportunity right now to step forward in who Jesus wants us to be. You can't go back and change. You can't go wait to the future to change. Right now is the opportunity to continue to grow and grow up in our relationship with Jesus. Never go back. It's about growing and learning and developing and changing. And oftentimes we don't want to because we're stuck. And because we're stuck in the past, we can't step into the future that God has for us. And I don't even mean just collectively as a church. I'm talking individually as people. And this whole series, these next 4 weeks, are about letting go of some things that are holding us back. Kim mentioned to me this morning, we were sitting, chatting, having coffee. She said this image for her was kind of throwing off. Let's throw off the things that hinder us, throw off the things that entangle us and hold us back. And that's what this series is about. See, what happens when you're stuck is that you might have a picture of where you want to be, but you don't have the willpower to get there. When we get stuck, we have a dream, but we don't have the discipline to get there. Or we have a desire for a different future, but we don't have the means or the resources to get there. Why go back to the past, even if the past was good? Why go back to the past? In fact, we're going to talk about that today as Paul unpacks this image for us and this picture for us. Because the truth is, if we want our marriages to look different and better the next 2 years, it has to be different than the past 2 years. If we want our finances to be better into the future, that has to be different than the past. So, Cher asked the question, if I could turn back time. If you could actually turn back time, what would you change? Like, ponder that question for a second and really ask yourself, if I had the power to turn back time, I actually believe with all of my heart that if we take this question and this series seriously, in future years, you will actually have the opportunity to look back on August 4th, 2024, and say that series, that moment that I took serious changed the trajectory of my life. That's the power of the gospel. If you want to change, something needs to be different. Like if you want a second helping into the future of your marriage as it is now, change nothing. If you want a second helping of your finances as they are now into the future, change nothing. I'm kind of amazed sometimes at the conversations I have with people. Sometimes when people struggle financially, one of my first questions is, are you honoring God with your tithe? Listen, we've been here over 3 years. This is the second time I've talked about tithing. I don't talk about tithing. I did one message series my first year, nothing the last 2. But that's the first question I ask. Are you honoring God with your first? Are you honoring God with your best, or are you tipping him with what you have left over? See, because if you want to change, something needs to be different. If you want to change in your health, something needs to be different. I work out so I can eat because I like food. But if I want to get healthier and even better and shredded like my main man Gino, I have to change my diet. I have to change something. If you want it to change, something needs to be different in your life. And here's the reality. Many times we want change, we don't want to change. Or we want different and we want better, but I'm not going to do anything different to get it better, to make it better. We want the change in our lives, we just don't want to change. Marriage, finances, health, addictions, struggles. We want the change. People want change in their attitudes, and yet they hang out with the same negative friends all the time, and the friends don't challenge them to get better or be better. If you want to change, you have to change, not want to change. You have to change. And that's what this series is about. This series is not about second chances and redoing, because you never get a second chance to redo the first chance. We know that. That's what I tell our board. Like, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. It doesn't happen. You can make a second impression, or you can make a first impression the second time. But you can never go back and have a first impression for the first time because it's already happened. It's like every decision you make. And yet I think Jesus is a God of second chances, to not necessarily go back and redo, but to learn where we're at and step forward. Why go back? Why get stuck? And so, we're going to talk about Philippians chapter 3. In fact, these next 4 weeks, this is going to be our chapter. This is our book, this is our chapter, Philippians chapter 3. And when I think about the thought of, or the construct of why go back, there are a lot of people that come to mind about letting go of the past. Like a guy like Moses. If you're familiar with Moses, Moses was a guy, right, that led his people out of Israel with the power of God through the Red Sea. But Moses was the guy that questioned God and doubted God and told God no and killed a guy. Like Moses was a guy that had to learn to leave things in the past. Think about a guy like David. Right? We know about David, ruler, king, right? Killed Goliath, slept with another man's wife, had that guy killed, lost a child, shook his fist at God, and yet was known as what? A man after God's own heart. So that's another guy that we could talk about by leaving the past in the past and not holding on to it. I think about a guy like Peter. I mean, Jesus literally said, dude, you're going to deny me. And he's like, no, I won't. And then he does it. And then Peter and Jesus have a conversation after Jesus has been buried and resurrected. And they have this conversation, and Peter's like, man, I don't know what you see in me. I'm a failure. And Jesus is like, but I'm going to build my church on you. If there was a guy that should have gone back to the past and lived in it, it was probably Moses, it was probably David, it was probably Peter. But there's a guy named Paul. You might know him as Saul. Now, I want to give you a little bit of information on the guy named Paul that we know who wrote most of the New Testament. We know him as Paul. He also went by the name Saul of Tarsus. So when you hear Saul of Tarsus and Paul, they're the same person. And many times we're like, God changed his name. Yes and no. Here's what I mean. I grew up in Ottawa, Ontario. We grew up on the Ottawa River, which separated Ontario from Quebec. In Quebec, it's French-Canadian-speaking people. In Ontario, it's English-Canadian-speaking people. My name is Daniel. It's my given name. When an English-speaking person calls me Daniel, they call me Daniel. When a French-Canadian-speaking person calls me Daniel, it's actually Danielle. Because of their accent, because of their dialect, because of the region. So Paul, as a Roman citizen, from Greek to Hebrew, was actually Saul Paul. It's the same name. Like, he didn't change his birth certificate. We think, oh, he changed his name. He was just Saul Paul in a different area. When he went back to Rome, he was still Saul. But that's another conversation for another day. So when you hear Saul, it's actually Paul who wrote most of the New Testament. Saul, was brutal, vile, filthy, disgusting person. He was an evil man. You're like, what? Really? He wrote most of the New Testament. Like, this guy is awesome. But he wasn't. And this is what he says as he's writing Philippians. He said, listen, I don't have it all together. I've not achieved anything of importance. I'm not even achieved or reached perfection. Like, I used to be one way. Jesus showed up. I became a new person. I'm not reached perfection. But this is what I do. I press on to possess the perfection for which Christ Jesus first possessed in me. God has put in you purity. God has put in you love. God has put in you these things that will honor him. And that's what Paul's saying. Like, they're already in me. So I don't have it all together, brothers and sisters. I've not achieved it. But this is what I'm doing. I'm going to focus on one thing. I'm going to forget the past, and I'm going to look forward to what lies ahead. And I'm going to press on. Another translation says strain. I'm going to press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Jesus Christ, is calling me, is calling us. What Paul is saying very simply is this: I have to purposely forget the past and embrace the future. Again, not rocket science. You're like, Dan, I already know this. This is 101. This is not like, man, I forgot where I put my keys this morning. Man, I don't know where they went. That's not what he's talking about. It's not like, oh, I forgot that it turned to 35 from 45, officer. I forgot that it did that. Can you just give me a break? He's not talking about that. He's talking about intentionally choosing to leave the past in the past. The past hurts. The past disappointments. The past failures. The past frustrations. I'm purposely, he's saying, I'm choosing to forget that. And I'm going to strain ahead. And you're like, well, what's he choosing to forget? Like, wasn't he always just a really good guy? If you read Acts chapter 7, in Acts chapter 7, what we learn about Paul, Saul of Tarsus, is that before he was following Christ, a Christ follower, he was a Christ-like killer. He killed anybody that followed Jesus or pulled them into prison and arrested them, man, woman, and child. In fact, in Acts chapter 7, if you read about Acts chapter 7, which we will in a second, but I'll give you the preface, there's a group of people called the religious leaders, Sadducees and Pharisees, and they want to control the region, they want to control the religion, they want to control the narrative. And Saul realizes that the religious leaders are losing a little bit of grip and control on the people. And Saul stirs up the crowd a little bit. Now, I'm going to probably step on some toes with this statement, and I don't mean to, but I want to give you the image. What Saul is doing is January 6th. He is stirring up the crowd. Who caused it? I don't know, but I know it happened. Right? January 6th was chaos in the Capitol, right? That's what Saul is doing. He is stirring up the crowd to turn against anybody that would follow Jesus. He is stirring it up. And the crowd, because of Saul, rushed at a guy named Stephen. Stephen was in the synagogue. Stephen was preaching the good news of Jesus. And they rushed at Stephen, and they dragged him out of the city, and they began to stone him. Okay, this is not like stone him. Okay? So we're all clear. Not getting high together. This is grabbing rocks, boulders, and throwing them at a guy and killing him and crushing him with stones. Saul was vile. Stephen's accusers took off their coats and they laid them at the feet of a young man named Saul. That's a sign of respect, a sign of authority. That Saul, we trust you, Saul. We're putting our hope in you, Saul. We believe in you. And as they stoned him, Stephen prayed this: Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And he fell to his knees shouting, Lord, don't hold this sin against them. Can we just talk about this for a second? Literally being stoned to death and forgiving them. I wonder if there's some of us in the room or listening online that might need to forgive somebody for something far less offensive than killing you. And with that he died, and Saul approved of their killing him. And on that day, because of Saul, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles scattered through Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him, but Saul began to destroy the church. He went from house to house and dragged people, men and women, and put them in prison. Saul was not a nice man. Saul was not a kind man. And before he was a church planter, Saul was a church purger. In fact, I'm going to show you a picture, and you're going to be like, no, there's no way. This is Saul of Tarsus. This guy thought he was doing something holy by erasing something in the name of God, erasing an entire nation, a race of people. So did Saul. You want to get it modern? Think 9/11, right? The Twin Towers. All in the name of something higher power. This is Saul of Tarsus. Vile, wicked, brutal. We like to think of him as this wise sage with a big beard and just jolly and just writing letters. And he became that because he forgot the past and strained towards the future. See, listen, when we choose to forget what's behind us and we strain towards what's ahead of us, something begins to shift in our souls. What begins to shift? Well, your past, first of all, no longer defines you. The things you said, the things you did, the things you watched, the things you participated in, they're in the past. And if you let them there and leave them there and you strain towards what ahead, they no longer define you. Your shame no longer defines you. Anything that you did, that you chose to do, that you participated in, those past decisions no longer defines you. In fact, what the scripture says, and Paul wrote this, is that when you turn your life to Jesus, that shift, that surrender, the old you leaves and the new person comes. You're made new. Like if there was anybody that should have been living in shame, it was a guy named Saul of Tarsus for what he had done. See, guilt would tell us I did something bad. Guilt's not a bad thing. Guilt's that conscious, that's the reminder. Yeah, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. I am worthless. I am unlovable. I am no good. I don't belong to anything or anybody. Nobody ever will accept. That's what shame says. We wear shame sometimes as a label or a badge. In fact, I know people who carry their shame and they wear it as a badge. And they think that everybody, when they look at them, they think everybody sees them as that, whether it's divorce, bankruptcy, addiction. Oh, well, when they see me, when they look at me, or when I walk in a room, I guarantee you, everybody's thinking that about me. No, they're not. You wear it, and you carry it, and you assume that everybody else does, and we don't. And Paul wore his killing of Christians as a badge of honor. He was uttering threats with every breath, eager to kill off the Lord's followers, badge of honor. He went to the high priest and requested letters to the synagogues asking for their cooperation to arrest any followers of Jesus, badge of honor. He was going to bring them back to Jerusalem and throw them in chains, men and women and children. Like, this is badge of honor stuff. But as he was approaching Damascus on his mission, a light from heaven suddenly came down. The reason I didn't say shone is I don't know if it's shone or Sean, and I didn't want to get confussed. I was like, I don't even know what that word is. Is it shone or Sean? Came down is what I translated it to. And he fell to the ground, and he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And this is what Saul says. Who are you, Lord? I'm Jesus, the one you're persecuting. Get up and go into the city, and you'll be told there what you must do. Stop, TV, time out. You know where Jesus is sending Saul? To the very city he was going to arrest the disciples, into Damascus. Go ahead on to the city. I know what you're going to do. I know the decisions that you're making. I know that you have letters from the high priest to arrest all of my followers. Jesus knew that. Go on ahead to the city. The men that were with Saul, they stood speechless. They heard the sound, but didn't know anything was happening. They couldn't figure out. There was no one to see. And so Saul picked himself up off the ground, and when he opened his eyes, he was blind. So the people that were with him led him by the hand into the city that he was already going to arrest and destroy Christians. And there he remained blind for 3 days and didn't eat anything and didn't drink anything. Now, for the sake of time, let me fast forward to what happens next. There's a disciple named Ananias. Ananias gets a word and a message from Jesus. Hey, I need you to go to Damascus. There's a guy named there, Saul of Tarsus. I need you to go and minister to him and witness to him and share the good news. And Ananias is like, absolutely not. Saul's going to kill me. And Jesus is like, hey, can you just do this for me? Just trust me. And he's like, okay, here we go. I'm going to die. And he goes and he shares the hope of Jesus with Saul and lays hands on him. And something like scales, Scripture says, falls off of Saul's eyes. And he opens them up and he can see. But you know what he can see? He can see. I can see clearly. He can see clearly. And he realizes what's just happened. And in this moment, he becomes a new creation. He shifts from the old and becomes the new. But there's a shift that happens that we don't talk about very often in Paul's life. And it happens sometimes in our lives too, or needs to. That his success no longer defined him. See, I know people who wear their success as their badge. No one ever, hey, I'm Dan, nice to meet you. I struggle with abuse. Hey, I'm Dan, nice to meet you. I'm addicted to alcohol. Hey, Dan, I'm nice to meet you. I shoot up heroin every night. Like, no one introduces themselves with their problems. But you know how we introduce ourselves? Hey, I'm Dan. I'm a pastor at a church. Hey, I'm so-and-so. I got 5 businesses. You can see the ocean from my driveway. Like, we introduce ourselves with pride in our success. There's nothing wrong with that. But it becomes our label. It becomes our billboard. It becomes our badge. See, Saul was incredibly successful. So successful. In fact, if you were paying attention, as the crowd rushed at Stephen and dragged him out, they put their robes and their cloaks at the feet of a young man named Saul. And I dug into this. Saul was about late 20s, early 30s. Unheard of at this age to be giving this authority. Unheard of at this age to be going to the highest leaders and asking for permission to arrest and destroy and kill Christians. Unheard of. He was climbing the charts, high-ranking, fast-tracking it. On all accounts, Saul was probably the most successful and banner of success in this time. And he leaves it all in the past to follow a guy that he'd never met personally. The disciples had met Jesus personally. Paul didn't. Experienced the blinding light, but never met him personally. He left his success in the past. You're like, well, Dan, what's your point? Like, what are you trying to get home? There is a difference in letting Jesus define you and your success define you. There's the difference. Some of you know our story. You know that we pastored at a church of about 18,000 people every week at 9 campuses. Easter Sunday one year, between 40 to 45 services, we had 33,000 people. On all accounts, that's success. And then God said, hey, Dan and Kim, why don't you move? And Dan said, really? No, hard pass. I really like this. This is amazing. And Jesus said, no, it's time to go. My success at that church was my defining feature. Well, I'm on staff at this massive church. This is incredible. Look at me. And it became what I defined myself by. And so in 2015, God called us away from that. And we had to let that go. And it was hard. Because it was, in my mind, awesome. See, what if God is actually calling you to let go, to why go back to that success? It's actually going to hinder you in the long run. That business, that dream that you have, what if it's going to pull you from your wife and kids or your husband and your kids? What if you don't see the bankruptcy on the other side of it because it's not going to take off, but in your mind it is? Like, listen, I'm just telling you, God sees things that we don't see. And in my mind, human mind, this is the best place to be at, this church. And in God's mind, he's like, but I need you here. I need you to let it go. And so we let it go. There's a difference I want you to hear. And this is what Paul teaches us. There's a difference between being a product of your past and a prisoner of your past. The product is, and we know this, there's consequences. You reap what you sow. You end up where you walk, right? You are what you eat, the cause and effect. That's the product. But what Paul is saying is you don't need to be a prisoner of your past. The past decisions, the past shame, the past choices, the past people, the past successes, you don't have to be a prisoner to that. You don't have to long for that. Turn and strain towards what's ahead. See, oftentimes we want change. We just don't want to, as humans, to change. And if you want a second helping of your past, do nothing into the present and it will be the same in the future. If you want a second helping of the past, do nothing different in the present, and you will have a second helping into the future. See, we want change. We want to be better and do better and look better and get better and feel better and think better and speak better. We just don't want to change anything to have it happen. You can't turn back time. But I believe you can change the trajectory of your life. So I want to close with two questions. Question number one. What is one thing that you want to change? It can be marriage. I want a better marriage. I want to change from being single to being married. I want to change my finances. I want to change my health. I want to change my attitude. I want to change my language. I want to change my thoughts. I want to change the algorithm on my phone because everything that I get is just negative, negative, negative. I got to change that. What do you want to change? Change is hard. What's really interesting is this message has been planned and written and done officially done for weeks, but planned and prepped for months. This change here wasn't planned till the end of August. And I was over here last night, I was at my spot praying, prepping, planning, and God just said, what if you think it's cool that it got changed, but what if by the providence of me, it actually changed on the message you're talking about changed? It wasn't supposed to be done yet. Our chairs weren't supposed to be in yet. The carpet crew wasn't available till I think the 19th or the 20th of August. They weren't supposed to be in yet. I'd already got this message planned and prepped, and all of a sudden, last Sunday the pews are out, this Sunday we're in chairs and new carpet, and God's like, do you think that this might be for some of the people in our church? Because change is hard, and I get that. A college professor of mine used to always say this: if you fail to plan to fail. What do you want to change? If you fail to plan to fail. So here's the follow-up. What are you going to do to change? You can say you want change. You can say you want a better marriage, better health, better thoughts, better attitude, better language, better viewing habits, better friendships, better relationships, better forgiveness, better love, better joy, better peace, better kindness. You can say you want those things. But if nothing changes, that's lip service. And if nothing changes, you're not going to change. So what do you want to change? And then what are you going to do to change? So here's what I want to do. It's 11 o'clock. Cracker Barrels is just getting open. You don't want to be the first one there. Kind of feels weird when the lunch menu shifts over. They got to get the char on the grill. You want it seasoned a little bit. So we're going to wait. We'll give you a second before you rush off to the Bob Evans and the barrels. I want you to think about this question. I'm going to give you space just for a second. 30 seconds, 60 seconds. We're just going to sit in silence. Silence is awful. I hate silence. But I want you to ask yourself that question. What's one thing I want to change? Patience with my kids. Loving my wife better. More love for people who don't think like me. More peace in my life. I want to be kinder to people. sometimes I can come across as abrasive. Let me work on gentleness. Here's how I'm going to do it. When I see something happen that I don't necessarily like, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. It's a good idea. That can help me change. Think about that question. What do you want to change? I want more self-control. Then push the plate away at 2 plates. Put the fork down after 1. It's not hard to change, and we want changed. We just don't do anything to make it happen. And if you fail to plan, just go ahead and plan to fail.